Live from the bridge at the Launchpad Studios in Huntington, New York, it's Sports Talk New York with your hosts, Mark Rosenman and AJ Carter. Sports Talk New York is sponsored in part by Cardboard Memories, Clearview, Long Island, the law firm of Decolator, Cohen, and DePrisco, the Phoenix Tube Company, PIMS Incorporated, fueling brand performance for 30 years, Prince Associates for all your insurance needs, and Soho Table Hockey. Here are your hosts, Mark and AJ.
And good Sunday evening to you. Before I even get into the show, we have to take a moment, Mike. I don't know if you're aware of this, but AJ celebrated a big birthday, his 85th birthday this week.
Not quite, but it's
happy birthday.
Getting there, thank you.
Getting there. We hope.
We hope.
Mark Roseman, AJ Carter with you this Sunday evening. We hope you are either tuning in on the 365 Sportscast Network, whether it be over your Alexa or your iPhone or your Android or in the car with your Apple CarPlay, or just even watching us on YouTube Live or Facebook Live. We appreciate it. Any way you listen to us, it's all good. And if you are a longtime listener of the show, you know we started off each and every week with the Major League Baseball Report with John Coppinger, which is sponsored by Cardboard Memories, which is one of Long Island's most reputable. I don't know how reputable they are, since they're going to have you and me doing a book signing.
Well, that's nothing to do with what they sell. That's opening their store to you and me,
right?
And Brett
and Eric Sherman. They are one of the most reputable memorabilia retail stores for over 29 years. The owner of Cardboard Memories, Scott Stamell, is known for his knowledge and savvy of authentic autographs. He's been featured on HBO's Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel. Cardboard Memories possesses the honesty and integrity one would want and need from a memorabilia source. Cardboard Memories is always buying collections large and small. Let Cardboard Memories run your next charity fundraising auction. Call them to find out how they can help your organization at no cost. Cardboard Memories is located at 6401 Jericho Turnpike in Comac, New York. Visit them on the web at cardboardmemories.com or follow them on Facebook or Instagram. I guess if you go into Cardboard Memories, this is going to be an interesting question. What is the value of a Robinson Cano baseball card? And more importantly, John, what is the value to Robinson Cano, who's already started playing baseball right now?
Dominican Republic.
In the Dominican Republic.
The question is, how much is his value affected by whether there's a universal DH?
The value of Robinson Cano, look, he's going to make $40 million no matter what, unless he's dumb enough to get suspended a third time. Anything is possible. We didn't think the second time was possible, right, but it happened. Look, the Mets are going to have to find a solution to this, whether it be, I think we all thought when Steve Cohen bought the team that, he's going to take the loss, cut him, and that's that. Just like, and then he's going to take more money and throw it at Bobby Bonilla and Bobby Bonilla Day. None of that stuff has really happened. So now you're thinking, you got to think a little more realistically that there's going to be a place for Cano on the team, whether it be, he could be a really expensive bench piece. I think if the Mets play it right, he should be an expensive bench piece, but a valuable bench piece. But he could play third base down the line. You never know. So I think there's going to be a place for him. The role has yet to be determined, but I think I think there's going to be a place for Robinson Cano in 2022.
So how much, John, does the Robinson Cano factor presence affect the Mets' decision to continue going after Javi Baez?
I don't think it affects it at all. I think the fact that meeting with Baez this early in the free agent process, I think it shows that they want him back. And there's at least some interest going the other way from Baez's camp. I don't think that's going to matter. I think if they have to find a place for Cano to play every day, they can with some creative roster maneuvering. But I honestly don't think one has anything to do with the other. I think the brass really likes Javi Baez. I think he put up, he did put up very good numbers after the thumbs down thing. So I think there is at least a good chance, if not a great chance, that something gets done with Baez, no matter what happens with Cano.
The interesting thing with Cano is we really don't know, what the steroids, how much of an effect it had on him, because he was having an unbelievable season. And, for all,
but that was a shortened season. That's the question.
Well, here's
what happens in 100. Does he hold up in 100?
Here's the thing. Season? So the question is, he was a very good, believe it or not, impact in the clubhouse. He was well respected. He worked hard coming back from those hamstring and all his issues. He got back and was having a nice run there. But now, you know what? You were worried about that tail end of that contract. Luckily, the Mets got to buy it from one season. They didn't have to pay it. But maybe a year off for a player of that age and a guy who always has been in good shape might, you might catch lightning in a bottle for 1 year with him. Do you think that is a possibility? Look, well,
absolutely.
Right. Here's the better question.
I think it's a possibility.
Here's a better question. All right. If you had to, if the under over on Robinson Cano / let's say average was 280, 20 home runs, 60 RBIs, would you go under or over those numbers?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I'd go under because there is going to, even though he's going to be in good shape, there is going to be a little rust. And there's also the matter of playing time, how much he gets. So I would say I would think he's definitely going to be under the counting numbers, home runs, RBIs. In terms of the average, that could be a number of factors. It's whether he's used right, if he's used not enough, too much, because there is going to be a little rust that he's going to have to shake off. And then if he does have to switch to a bench role, acclimate to a bench role, I think that could affect him also. So I think I would go, even if he's a useful piece off the bench, I think I go under.
See, I'm not willing to say under. I'm not willing to say over either.
Right.
Because so much depends upon injuries, not only his injury, anybody else's, where he plays. They decide he fits into third base better than J.D. Davis, better than Jonathan Villar. He wasn't a bad fielding second baseman.
No.
And
if Baez slides over to third.
Well, no. You transition him to third, Cano to third because it's less range. Can he be
right.
Sort of a much better fielder than J.D. Davis?
Right. You're a much better fielder than J.D.
Right.
Davis.
So, and also, while looking at Mets, get beyond Cano, when will we have a general manager? Will it be a one-season one? Will it be a space holder? Will they convince the guy who didn't make partner at the law firm in Pittsburgh that he should be GM for a year while they wait for David Stearns?
Wait, speaking of which, we have to mention this, okay? Because when they were talking about Combry, the lawyer that played for the Nationals, WFAN, right? Yeah. WFAN went off on that, and they spoke a lot about our good friends over Decolator Conan DePrisco, and say, why not one of those guys? So we gotta shout that out. That was a very funny moment on WFAN. So we got to give those guys credit. They beat us to it. If we were on the air before then, we probably would have done it. But yeah, John, quickly, any update on the GM search?
No real update. The Adam Comrie, to me, I saw the picture of him. He looks like he's Brody Van Wagenen with a slightly cheaper tailor, slightly less expensive suit. But I think the Mets are doing themselves disservice. If the reports are true, if the Athletic report with Ken Rosenthal and Britt Garoli is true, and they've got their sights set on David Stearns or nobody, and they're willing to punt the year, I think they're doing themselves a disservice because there is a lot of talent out there that I think that they've kind of pushed away with this possibility of bringing in a guy, bringing in David Stearns next year, which means that anybody they would bring in would be a lame duck.
Well, how about, as they did in 1967, they gave up a player to get the manager they wanted. Remember, they actually traded for Gil Hodges.
Well, and I think that that's a possibility. I'm not a fan of sending assets away for managers or general managers, but the way things are going, it seems to me that there's a lot of behind the scenes maneuvering going on, which is why nobody's really saying anything, and which is why Sandy Alderson, quite frankly, has to make up ridiculous stories and reasons about why nobody will come to New York. With it's New York's fault. Yes, Sandy, pull this way to play Jingle Bells.
It's the rats and the raccoons.
Right, exactly. So I do think that there is some maneuvering. Listen, the Brewers denied permission for David Stearns, and they also denied permission for David Stearns' underling. They can't keep both going forward because they're going to have to lose one to somebody. So maybe there is some maneuvering. Say, okay, you want a draft pick or a reliever that we're going to wind up sending to Tampa Bay in 5 years anyway. I think that that's still a possibility. So that Stearns comes here this year. I don't think it's a great possibility, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
All right, Johnny, as we all sit here and await Thursday to see if Noah accepts the qualifying offer. We'll speak to you next week, and we'll know if he's back in the fold. John Coppinger heard him each and every week on Sports Talk New York over the 365 Sportscast Network. We're going to take a quick break on the other side. Arthur Staple joins us, so keep it tuned right here.
Do you own a business? When is the last time you actually had a visit from or even spoke with your insurance representative? Did your current insurance agency sell to another firm or maybe merge, leaving you without the attention you deserve? Prince Associates is a provider of commercial insurance nationwide and represents some of the finest insurance carriers in the industry. Prince Associates has been representing commercial clients since 1965, and we continue to grow and offer our personal services in a competitive and ever-changing market. If you want back the insurance relationship you deserve, reach out to us, 516-822-6550. That's area code 516-822-6550. And ask for Leith or Craig, or find us on the web at www.princeins.com.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York. Mark Roseman, AJ Carter with you this Sunday evening. Just waiting for Arthur Staple, who's actually out at Madison Square Garden, going to be covering the Rangers-Devils game. Guy is wearing many, many hats these days. And
I remember him way back when.
Yes, you do. And then maybe we'll get into that a little bit. So interesting stuff. So, you went out golfing. I heard that was great for your birthday.
I went out to the day before, last Saturday. I went out to Stadium Golf at Citi Field. Do we have Arthur?
Yeah, we have.
We'll talk about that later, about golfing at Citi Field, the 9-hole course going through the stands at Citi Field.
It looked like you enjoyed it, but
it was fun.
Joining us now is the hardest working man in the NHL. He's currently pulling double duty, covering both the Islanders and Rangers for The Athletic. He previously spent 20 years at Newsday. I don't know how he could have spent 20 years if you were there, AJ. That's covering the Islanders.
I was there for 35.
As well as covering the Islanders, as well as wide-ranging sports topics. He's one of the probably owns the greatest collection of defunct hockey team hats of anyone I know. He has a brand new book out, 100 Things Islander Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. He has somehow collected every essential piece of Islanders knowledge as well as must-do activities, ranks them all from 1 to 100. This book is a must-have, whether you are there for the franchise's first 4 cups or they are just diving in right now. There are 100 things every fan needs to know and do in their lifetime. It is a pleasure to welcome the man who put it all together, the one and only Arthur Staple of Sports Talk New York. Welcome, Arthur.
It's good to be here, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, and you hear that noise in the background. He is at Madison Square Garden. So this is a series of books that Triumph has put together, and they've had a lot of success with. There's a specific formula that the books follow, but each author has the ability to come up with their 100. What was the process you used to come up with the 100 and rank them?
Well, Mark, you're a veteran of writing many more books than me, so it can be a torturous process at times. I just kind of based a lot of it on a lot of research, talked to as many people as I could, a lot of Islander fans who I've gotten to know over the years about, the things they remember the most, the things that are most important to them, and try to throw in a few of my own from the decade or so I spent covering them, not just at Newsday, but at The Athletic too. So it all came out to 100, just barely. My counting skills were pretty weak by the end of it, but it was a fun ride for sure.
I'm also curious about the process and how you approach the book. Which readership group are you trying to reach? Longtime Islanders fans for whom the chapters will rekindle memories, or newer, probably younger fans who many of the stories will be new?
AJ, I think it's some of both. Part of the process for me, I wasn't an Islander fan growing up, and that the dynasty era was kind of just before my time really paying attention to hockey. So not just reading old clips from Newsday, from the Times, from the people that were covering those games, but also talking to the guys involved. Some of those stories were new to me, and I thought these little details that may not have been, headline makers back then, but just kind of the day-to-day stuff that went on inside the locker room, the dealings with Bill Torrey and with Al Arbor for some of the guys that were on those dynasty teams. I feel like the details really make those stories. And so I think you're trying to appeal to people who lived through it, but maybe don't know some of the inside stuff. And then some people who came to the Islanders a little bit later in their lives or were too young to remember those days. And then you give some of them the basics with a little bit of heightened detail. So a little bit of both, I think, and just thinking about some of the fun things that I learned. Chico Resch talking about Billy Smith's very typical Billy Smith speech before the playoffs started in 1980. I think a lot of the guys that were in the leadership group in that room were talking about they were a family and they needed to stay together. And it was, of course, Billy Smith standing up and saying, those guys over there want to take money out of our pockets, and I'm not going to let them do it. Chico said if there was money on the line, Billy Smith was your guy. So I love hearing stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff I think that makes those stories that people know pretty well a little bit more enjoyable to read.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, trying to educate some people. So I grew up a Rangers fan, and, I knew of the Islanders. I followed the Islanders. But, some of the little nuances that I didn't know, like you start the book out with the birth of the Islanders, and the best move that Roy Bo ever made was hiring the guy that the NHL suggested, Bill Torrey. But you point out in the book that there are two guys who were better known from other sports that had an impact on that. One, of course, was the guy he was working for, Charlie Finley, and the other is Art Rooney. So could you tell our listeners a little bit about how those two guys had a little bit to do with why Roy Bo ended up hiring Torrey?
It's that kind of stuff is obviously tough. Those people are all gone now, but just reading up about it and finding, that Torrey had worked in Oakland for that Charlie Finley's kind of failed SEALs venture. But I think, even in that, working for a guy like Charlie Finley, I think if you can survive that, you can survive almost anything. And just Torrey's Pittsburgh background, I think having to get in the Pittsburgh sports scene for a little while before he got his start. I think those worlds kind of collide a lot, hockey, football, the owners, especially in a new league like the NHL with those relatively new teams, you can get some good people on your side. So those recommendations, Roy Bo was certainly a character, a visionary, maybe a guy ahead of his time. A guy whose dreams were a little bit bigger than his wallet at times, but the fact that he was able to hire someone like Bill really made all the difference. I think the Islanders wouldn't be what the Islanders became without that one decision, and it's always fun to see how the kind of those things trickle down from the original time.
And also, you get an education, especially if you're a younger fan. People marvel at the job that George McPhee did with Vegas, obviously under different circumstances with the way the expansion draft was done. But the foundation that Bo laid in that first draft, Billy Harris overall #1, their second and third round picks, Lauren Henning, Bobby Nystrom, 10th round, Gary Howard. When you went back and looked at how the Islanders were built and some of these moves that Torrey made along the way, what were some of the things that just jumped out at you like, wow, this is unbelievable, the way this dynasty ended up being built?
Yeah, I think just the way that he approached the expansion draft, and in a kind of a disappointing fashion, I think the Islanders thought maybe they'd be able to get a better team than they did. They were, the NHL kind of ruled that if guys were interested in going to the fledgling WHA, which a lot of them were, rather than go to the island and play for an expansion team, that really threw off his plan a little bit. But the way that he rebounded, like you said, there were at least 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 guys from each of those first 2 drafts that they really targeted, drafting Brian Trottier essentially a year early at 18, because guys were mostly drafted at 19 and 20 back then. Sitting in the cold in Manitoba, watching Trottier play a junior A level game, and seeing that this undersized guy who had a lot of heart might work well in what they've got, and how many years later to see Brian Trottier as one of the all-time great players in the history of the league. And then things like Bob Bourne, a guy who'd been drafted by Kansas City. They came to him at the end of training camp and said, we're not going to keep you. Do you want to go somewhere to play? And he knew Clark Gillies. They grew up together, and ironically now they're grandfathers together, which is one of the great stories of all time, that their kids married each other and have a couple of kids now themselves. But I think Bob Bourne said there's a lot of Western Canada guys in the team and they're playing. I want to go there. And so trade, for Bart Crashley, who was picked by the Islanders in the expansion draft, had gone to WHA. So basically a trade for nothing. And another longtime core dynasty Islander comes along. So it's a little bit of luck, like it is with any team, but a lot of shrewd moves by Bill Torrey. Jim Devellano, who helped him, who was his assistant for a long time in those early days. They were quite a team. And when you can say you didn't, sometimes you have an established team and a new GM comes in, you've inherited some things. Bill Torrey inherited nothing,
Right.
maybe less than nothing, and turned it into what he turned it into.
And with Bourne and Gillies too, the two of them were minor league baseball teammates ironically, the manager of the team's name was Billy Smith. But you just mentioned Jimmy D, and this is another great tidbit that you bring up, that after that first season with the two coaches, the search for the new coach went out in earnest, and Al Arbor wasn't the first choice. There were two other guys, but Jimmy D really is the guy that's instrumental in getting Arbor hired. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, Jimmy wrote a great book about mostly about his time in Detroit, obviously, which was a huge success. But he had a big hand in kind of building up the Islanders in the pre-Cup days. And Al Arbor was a guy who'd had a run in St. Louis and maybe hadn't quite succeeded as well as you would have thought. And starting with an expansion team, even one as successful as the Blues were, making the finals as they did a few years, it still was an expansion situation. And I think Al Arbor was a little leery of doing that all over again. But when he came in and saw the island, and I think the funny story about they were on vacation after his interview in Florida, he and his wife, and they met a couple from Long Island, and they were telling him how great it is up in the island, all the things you can do, how great it is to have a family there, and that kind of helped seal the deal. But yeah, it's amazing to see the ways those could have gone again. Much like Roy Bowe choosing Bill Torrey and Jimmy Devellano choosing Al Arbor, a guy who hadn't quite had the success as a coach that maybe they wanted to bring into that situation after such a terrible first season. And the improvements that they made right away under Al Arbor, his personality and his coaching style fit what they wanted to do, and they were on their way in a very short amount of time.
I think the line of demarcation for the franchise is 75, and you talk about it in Chapter 10, which is entitled 11 Seconds. It's also probably the line of demarcation when I actually started needing therapy, being a Ranger fan on Long Island, especially having to hear John Sterling call that 11 seconds into overtime, J.P. Parisi from Jujune. But a lot of people forget that the Islanders coughed up a 3-goal lead in that game. But what did that early playoff series win against the Rangers mean to the franchise and the growth of that core?
The young guys on that team, and obviously it was their kind of their senior line, I guess you'd call it, with those two guys that Torrey had picked up, Juju and JP Parise, with Eddie Westfall, who was their first captain, and a guy who was maybe a little past his prime when they picked him up in the expansion draft from the Bruins, but was the consummate pro and came in and was the captain and kind of led the way and brought a lot of the kids into the core of the team and made sure that they were all included in everything. But they're still, it's still a very young team. And I think a lot of the young guys, when they're first were playing those home games in 73, 74, 74, 75, playing against the Rangers in the Coliseum, having it be 75% Ranger fans, I think they felt mad. I think they felt like, this is our team, this is our area, we should have more fans here. And I think that was a real driving force to know that the Rangers weren't necessarily world beaters in those, the 70s, at least after their 2 trips to the finals, but they were still the big brother to the Islanders, little brother. And as we talked about in the book, the financial hole that the Islanders were in, the money that they owed the Rangers just for existing, for the Rangers giving up their territorial rights to allow the Islanders into the league, that money was accruing. I think there was just a sense of, this is our hill to climb right here. And the fact that they were able to do it in that series so quickly, 3rd year of existence, and then go on to do what they did, which is come back from 3-0 down, beat the Penguins, almost do it again against the Flyers in the semifinals. It was heady times for them, and I think they arrived in the right kind of fashion to not only build up their own confidence, but build up their fan base. They beat the big boys from the city, so I think that got a lot of people from Long Island to realize that this team is for real.
Arthur, I like that you dedicate a couple of chapters in the book to Islanders villains. And in my book, Dale Hunter's at the top of the list, maybe because I was there in the Coliseum and the Newsday box the night he took the hit on Pierre Turgeon. But you rank him as a greater villain. Someone hurt the Islanders by playing for them, not against them, Kurt Muller. Why do you feel Muller was an even greater villain?
That's one where I lean on a lot of the friends that I've made over the years who are diehard Islander fans from that 90s era. It was such a dark time with the ownership shenanigans that were going on when John Pickett decided to step away and really things went downhill very quickly. Bill Torrey was phased out. Don Maloney came in, then Mike Milbury. And Milbury was working his hardest to try to legitimize the team and keep them afloat and grasping at whatever he could grasp at. And Kirk Muller was a guy who incredibly respected player in the league, in his time in the league, a high skilled player, a guy who accomplished a lot. And I think Islander fans felt some hope when that trade was made that someone wanted to come there and play and lead this team. And immediately he was very vocal about wanting no part of it. And I think it just it was a thing that broke a lot of the Islander fans' backs. And I think, it's easier to hate someone who doesn't want to play for your team than the people that are running your team, for sure, because you know that hopefully someday your fandom will be rewarded. So there's definitely been some people over the years that haven't wanted to come play for the Islanders. Some did come and ended up liking it. In more recent years, guys like Evgeny Nabokov, who balked at coming, Lubo Vishnowsky, was traded here and didn't really seem to be interested in coming. They both came and had some success in the last 15 years or so. But Kirk Muller is really the one guy that came kicking and screaming, didn't do anything during the time he was here, and wanted out immediately, and really just coincided with one of the real deep valleys in the Islanders' history.
It's also interesting because when you take a look at the history of franchises, if the Islanders didn't have that dynasty, there are other moments that may have jumped way up on top of the list. And one of them obviously is the Easter epic. And another one is, I probably think Sean Bates might be the Endy Chavez of the Islanders. You take a look at a great moment, but you go on to lose a series. What does it mean? But those two moments, if you take away the Islander dynasty years, where do you think those two moments would have ranked?
They're definitely up there. And I think, the beauty of it is, as we were talking about it earlier, about, fans of different ages really value different things. And I think for fans of a certain age, that Sean Bates goal was really the apex of their fandom in the late 90s and early 2000s. Those teams in the early 2000s were good, but that particular season where they kind of came from nothing, hiring Peter Laviolette, trades for Alexei Yashin and Michael Pekka, Chris Osgood coming off waivers, it all just seemed to come together. They had a hot start that year. I think they were 9-1-1. So there was a lot more interest in that year than there had been in a long, long time. And then that series that tons of people, Islanders players, Leafs players, fans from both teams say was one of the nastiest, most intense series. And it was a first-round series, which was amazing between two teams that hadn't played in the playoffs in almost, I think it was 23 years. It was rough, and it was physical, and it was over the line a lot, and there were a lot of big goals. And I think just having one of those Coliseum moments where you say, I was there that night when something great happened, and that moment was Sean Bates' penalty shot. It was a night to remember, even if it didn't ultimately end the way that they wanted it to in that series. But it was, and the fact that it was a guy who'd been another guy who'd been kind of cast off from the organization, Peter Laviolette, knew him well and brought him in, and he really flourished in his couple of years in the island. That made it even sweeter because that kind of epitomized what the Islanders were about for a long, long time of trying to win without a lot of stars.
You sprinkle chapters about the various Islanders owners throughout the book, and two of them are curious to me. One is Charles Wang's tenure is only number 72, and wondering why you waited so long to get to the Wang era. And then in writing about the John Spano fiasco, which I remember very well, you key on the Kevin Connolly 30-30 documentary, not on the Newsday stories that uncovered many of his lies. So any reason you didn't name Newsday in that chapter? So let's talk about Wang first, why you went to 72, and about why you used Kevin Connolly for the Spano fiasco.
Well, AJ, unfortunately, we live in a very visual world these days, and Kevin, as being maybe one of the most well-known celebrity Islander fans, the documentary he put together is pretty succinct. I think he relied a lot on Newsday. He certainly interviewed Alan Hahn, who was Newsday's writer back then, and John Valenti, who was central to a lot of those stories from back in the 90s. But sometimes. The vagaries of putting a book together on deadline take precedent with trying to find stories and reading through things. So I was able to do both, but there's the part of the book that is not just things to know, but also do. And I think watching that documentary is one thing to do that sums it up pretty neatly. What an incredibly bizarre stretch of time that was with Spano, and what an incredible character he was, not in a good way. But and as far as Charles Wong goes, working in Newsday during the time that he was owning the team, he was an outsized influence, I think, for Long Island, more so than for Islander fans. I think their view of him is a little bit more mixed. He certainly had a rocky start with his company being investigated and his original Islanders ownership partner going to prison. But I think his legacy is sort of muted now because of what's gone on since then. The fans are all about results, and Charles definitely did things his own way. He obviously came in, with a flourish, and like I said, in 2001 when they had a little bit more success and he was willing to spend more. But then when the arena, the goal of trying to get a new arena fizzled out, he really receded from view a little bit. And I think the transfer over to Scott Malkin and John Ledecky and the success the team has had, and now a new arena coming, it's certainly a lot to do with Charles Wong's legacy. But I'm not so sure that the fans take the same sort of view that we do from 10,000 feet on.
I know you have to get ready to start covering the game and your normal Twitter stuff, so we're not going to keep you much longer. Just have a few more questions. It's not every fan group that gets to crack the top 100, but makes it into the top 50 in your book. For fans outside of New York area, why is it important for Islander fans to sit up and sing along with the Blue and Orange Army?
It's a group of people that were there when there was hardly anybody else in the Coliseum, and now that UBS Arena is going to be full, I feel like it's right to honor those people. I've definitely covered a lot of Islander games in the early 2010s that maybe had 5,000 people or 6,000 people, but those guys, those men and women, were there every night, at least a couple hundred of them, banging drums, making like it was a full house at Wembley Stadium for an FA Cup semifinal, but singing their songs and coming up with chants and trying to make it as festive an atmosphere as possible, which was not always the case in the Coliseum during some of the darker days. So it is fun to, I think a lot of people, when they think about the Dynasty era, Coliseum being full all the time, Fort never lose, and then the way that it just sort of emptied out when the owners let the team fall into disrepair. I think those fans that stayed really deserve a lot of credit for sticking through with a team that didn't give them a lot of love back and really didn't give them much to cheer about. So I feel like that's why they belong that high up. And now that the team's back to being a sold-out success, they're all still there, and they're singing their songs about Josh Bailey or about whoever else, and it's worth mentioning.
So this is going a little back in the chronology. One of my favorite parts of the book was the chapter on the house on Wayfield Terrace. I guess a place you don't want fans to go to not disturb the current owners of the house. And probably I liked it because many years ago, a house in the neighborhood Mark and I live in had 4 Islanders, Steve Thomas being one of them. So can you tell our listeners about that house and about the significance to the team?
It's one of those little stories. I got to know Mark Parrish pretty well. He co-hosted my podcast a couple of years ago, and the guy who's done some TV work over the years. Obviously, Eric Cairns has worked for the Islanders now for a long time since he retired. Steve Webb works for the Players Association. These are guys that have been around the sport, and it's fun to just sort of catch up with them and realize the connections that they all still have. And I'd heard about this house even from Garth Snow, because that was his Sunday football watching spot, because I don't think he was married quite at the time either. So, I think when we think about professional athletes, it does have a very collegiate feel to it. And those were 4 relatively young guys that all lived in that house along with Sean Bates. And a lot of stories were sort of hinted at, but not really detailed, because nobody wanted to take credit for putting them in the book or putting them out into the world. But they had a lot of fun, and I think that camaraderie of guys living together or guys spending time together, they always hear about when teams go on road trips, they get to hang out and bond a little bit away from families and kind of have that closeness. That was a team that got close right away and had some success right away. A lot of it, I think, had to do with those sorts of environments, with guys hanging out at houses, getting up to some shenanigans that hopefully weren't too bad, and then standing up for each other. Eric Cairns jumping in to fight Shane Corson in that playoff series after a big hit. I think had a lot to do with those guys being so close. So I do love those little details and hearing about the day-to-day lives and how they kind of pass the time through what was a very fun season, I think, for a lot of fans.
Before we let you go, let's talk about the two teams that you are currently covering. You took over the Rangers beat when the great Rick Carpinello retired. And watching the practices and the way the two teams go about their daily business, is there any major difference between the two, day-to-day, way these teams function that jumps out at you at all?
I think the Rangers are kind of on the path to getting to where the Islanders are. Obviously the records don't reflect that. The Rangers have been, put together a very good record in sort of a different way. A lot of good goaltending, some timely scoring. The Islanders haven't quite straightened things out yet. But I think when you watch the Islanders in training camp or in practice, you see a very business-like environment, a team that has been together a long time, coaching staff that's been together a long time. They know exactly what they need to be doing and when. Doesn't mean they do it well every day, but they know the task at hand. I think the Rangers are still in that process. It's a much younger team in a lot of spots. I think the focus is on the Rangers' younger guys and high draft picks like Capco and Alexis Lafreniere, who haven't quite broken out this season. And then they have a lot of higher end guys that maybe you won't associate with the hard work that the Islanders rather put in and day out and game and again, especially in the playoffs. So I think Gerard Gallant, it's not really he's a little bit like Barry Trotz. He's certainly not a stern taskmaster. He can be when he wants to be, but I think Gallant's goal with the Rangers is to get them to play the way that he wants them to play, but also have fun doing it. And Barry Trotz preaches a lot of the same things. There's only one Barry Trotz in terms of his personality and the way that he's able to get his message across. But the Rangers, like a lot of teams in the league, are trying to build towards what the Islanders have already done. And the Islanders, seem to be closer to a Stanley Cup than a lot of other teams. And the Rangers definitely just want to get there and want to be in the tournament. So it's interesting to see one team that's kind of further along the timeline than another, but both trying to become the similar sorts of teams and work towards the same goal.
So the Islanders are flying out to Florida. They have 2 games left on this long and winding road trip. Currently sit 5-4-2. Worst case scenario is they could finish 1 game under 500. Best case scenario, maybe 2 over 500. Even if they're 1 game under, do you think they might have signed up for that? Looking at that schedule and then adding the fact that they weren't going to have Varley for 10 of those 13 games.
Oh, absolutely, I think these road trips are very rare in the league, and kind of in researching some of them, I think the last one, coincidentally, was the Rangers in 2013 when this building that I'm in right now was going through its last stages of renovation. They started that season on a 9-game road trip and looked awful at times doing it. I think Ranger fans certainly remember Thomas Hertl going between the legs for a 4th goal at Marty Baron in San Jose. They went out the next game and got shut out in Anaheim. Things were looking bad. They had a brand new coach that year, Alain Vigneault. I think there was no panic in the room, but there was definitely some concern when they got back at 3-6-0. And it took them until about December to really get it going. And lo and behold, they ended up getting to the finals and playing a very competitive final series in a 5-game loss against the Kings. So I think that's something that the Islanders and their fans can hold on to, that the record doesn't look great, and it looks worse because everybody in the division seems to be winning night in and night out, which obviously will change as they play more divisional games. But, it's not a panic. It's not a panicked room. It's not a panicked coaching staff. It's certainly not a panicked front office that the Islanders have. So I think 12 points is maybe, probably 13 to 15 was their target. If they can get there with a point or two on these last 2 games, I think they'll be satisfied. Certainly not happy because they haven't quite played the way that they're capable of. But satisfied is probably a good word. And then you go into a stretch where there's a lot of home games. It's a brand new building. They'll be the only ones that have played on it more than once after a little bit of time. I think it'll look a lot like it did for them in Barclays in Brooklyn, which was not an ideal place to play, but was really a house of horrors for visiting teams because of some of the quirks of it. So, I think the Islanders will be sitting in a good spot, and if they are the team that we think they are, they won't sit back. They'll feel like they got through what they needed to get through. It's just another challenge to overcome, and they'll be on their way.
One more question before we let you go. If, let's say, you were still writing this book and it was going to include this season, forget about Belmont and UBS. The return of Zdeno Chara. Looking ahead, if you were writing the book, do you think it would have taken on a positive chapter, or do you think it would have taken on a negative chapter?
Well, I mean, I certainly wrote about it in a positive way right after he signed and before the season started. It's quite a story to see a guy come back after 20 plus years to a place where he started and may not have left very much given how things went when he was originally an Islander in the late 90s before he was dealt away in the Alexei Yashin deal. I think it's a tough transition for anybody, even a guy as accomplished as Zdeno Chara, to play this style of hockey day in and day out. You have to always have that motor going. You have to know where you're going, especially as a defenseman. And I feel like Chara has kind of been hurt a little bit because the team is just not playing as well as it normally does. If that were the case, I think they'd be covering up a few of his mistakes a little bit better and give him a little bit more of a chance to ease into it. And he's been better in the last 3 or 4 games. But it is a fascinating situation, and almost equally fascinating that Zach Parise decided to come. I don't think Zach was nostalgic for his dad's days as an Islander. It's much more to do with Lou Lamoriello, but it is a neat connection to going back to what we were talking about earlier, to see Zach's dad, who put the Islanders on the map 46 years ago, and now his son, who the Islanders passed over in his draft year, only to see the Devils take him and have him turn into a star. See him maybe close out his career playing in blue and orange that a lot of fans, I think, had hoped to see almost 20 years ago when he was drafted. So there's a lot of great storylines that kind of faded in the background because of the way the team started. But I think those are two guys that maybe if they're not counted on to be such central contributors to this team, can really provide a lot as opposed to having to play 18 or 19 minutes a night in Chara's case or score a bunch of goals in Parise's case, because I don't think those guys are at the stage of their career like that anymore.
It also doesn't help poor Z that the 2 times his stick breaks, the Bucks end up in the net for sure. Arthur, thank you so much for your time tonight. Where's the best place for people to get this great new book?
They can go on Amazon. There's a lot of local bookstores, I think, if they want to find a link for that online. But Amazon's probably your best bet, and it's been going really well. I've gotten a lot of great messages from people who are really excited to have it, and hopefully it keeps going. I appreciate everybody checking it out.
Awesome. Looking forward to seeing you at UBS at the end of the week and out at the practice arena during the week. Always great seeing you. Always great talking hockey with you. The one and only Arthur Staple. Read him every day in The Athletic. Pick up his new book, 100 Things Islander Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. Interestingly enough, we'll be back to talk more hockey with the man who wrote 100 Things Ranger Fans Need to Do, Russ Cohn with the Soho Table Hockey Report. Good night, Arthur. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
You got it. Arthur Staple. We'll be back right after this.
The Phoenix Tube Company Incorporated is among the country's leading manufacturers of structural ornamental stainless steel tubing, rectangles, squares, and processed flat bars. The company takes pride in its everyday commitment to quality and customer service. The philosophy of the company has been and continues to be to support the growth of the stainless tube market through distribution and service centers throughout the country. Ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing is used for a wide variety of aesthetic and mechanical products where superior finish and corrosion resistance are required. Some products manufactured include tubing for mirror bracket arms, boat rails and ladders, washroom grab bars, swimming pool rail products, medical equipment, automotive step bars and trimming, as well as structural framing for food processing equipment. For a quote or for more information on how the Phoenix Tube Company can meet your ornamental and structural stainless steel tubing needs, visit them on the web at phoenixtube.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-526-2124.
And welcome back to Sports Talk New York. I got to stop drinking 70 ounces of water a day.
That's your problem, Mark. It's go back to the old Weight Watchers plan.
But
not 70
I have to
ounces
say
of
this.
water.
I have not had a diet soda all week, and I do feel better. I have to say that for sure.
having a diet soda and I don't know how long.
It's time now for the NHL Report with Russ Cohn. It's sponsored by our friends over at Soho Table Hockey.
What's table hockey?
Oh, what's table hockey, you would say? Some of us might have grown up with rod hockey or bubble hockey or even air hockey tables. Soho Table Hockey has embraced the nostalgia of those old tabletop games, designed a whole new board for the future, handcrafted with designer wood, state-of-the-art playing surface, unbendable rods, energy-absorbing walls. This is a table hockey game that players age 8 to 80 can enjoy. Even better, the exceptional quality design allows the game to stand up to the intensity of tournaments, which is why Soho Table Hockey is the #1 choice of championship players throughout North America. Visit SohoTableHockey.com to learn more. Start your order on a custom game. You can choose your wood, a center ice logo, and even the team matchups. Go ahead, drop the puck. You'll love Soho Table Hockey so much you won't be able to stop playing. How you doing, Russ? Russ, you there?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I thought we lost you for a second. All right, lots to talk about. We just finished talking to Arthur Staple, and we talked about this Islanders' long road trip. You know, I feel for the guys because every single press conference, that's the main focus because it's not an excuse, but it's an interesting thing. You know, when
was the last time something like this happened? It's it's a long time.
When the Rangers refurbished the Garden, so that was a
no. It was when Vancouver had to leave early for the Olympics.
Oh, okay, that's right. That's true, also, right? But we were talking locally, so
locally. Sorry, gotcha.
All right, but you know what? Right now, the very worst the Islanders can do is come back one game under. They can go, possibly 2 games over, 3 games, one game under. If that is the worst case scenario, not having their, well, I don't know if he's their #1 because we've talked about it. I kind of believe that Sorokin is going to be the #1, but even so, no safety net for your goaltender. Varley out for those first 10. Do you think the Islanders would have signed up for even 1 game under 500 for that 13-game road trip if given everything?
Maybe, but it always depends how it goes. And if you lose to like Florida and Tampa, which is very possible, I think the issue then is there is a little something in the back of your mind like, those are 2 of the best teams in the league. And, we didn't beat them this time. Yeah, we certainly could beat them next time, but it's not going to be a great way to end the trip. That's the problem. If they had more wins banked and it happened, probably not as bad.
The other way to look at it, Russ, is how much pressure is to put on the Islanders to be overly good at home, to embrace the new arena and to prove it's their place and to put up, win 75% of the games, 80% of their games. You're supposed to win more at home than the road anyway, but how much is put extra pressure on them to win even more, higher percentage at home?
Oh, definitely there's going to be extra pressure. I mean, they're now going to, have to win, 65% of their home games to kind of make up the difference. And yeah, that's going to depend on the goaltending tandem. We can't say Varlamov is certainly in perfect shape yet because he definitely isn't. And so, again, are you going to ride Sorokin for the first, 6 or 7 and then put Varlamov again, or are you going to kind of even it out a little? That's going to matter too.
Also, that flies kind of underneath the radar because he's not, the most flashy player. Lots of people probably around the NHL know of him, but really don't appreciate how good a player he actually is. 1,000 games is a big milestone for any NHL player, let alone an undrafted player. I mean, you take a look at the guys that have done it: Marty St. Louis, Dan Girardi, Jason Blake in the 800s, and now Andy Green. Tell us a little bit about Andy Green and what that milestone means, and on top of what that milestone means, that on his team there's another defenseman that have played 600 more games than him.
Right. Well, the thing about Andy Green is he's a worker, and he never gives up on a play. He's a decent skater. He's a really good puck handler, and he has a pretty good shot. And if he's on the team, people kind of forget, like, there's usually other guys to watch in the offensive zone, and he can make a play, but he's very reliable. You can put him out there for 15 to 20 minutes. Now it's more like 14 minutes at his age, but before that, and you would get a lot out of him. He was always kind of that guy that tracked in the middle of everything. He has had some really high point years with the Devils, no question about it. But then after that, kind of figured out how to keep his career going, and he's been really good. And, just when you count him out, he'll get some big points for you too. So yeah, he's had an amazing career. He really has.
Rangers seem to maybe right the ship. One game it's against the other team that the Columbus Blue Jackets that they also look good. The other game they played, so I don't know yet. We'll see tonight against a very good Devils team. Chris Kreider off to an incredibly hot start as far as goals go, and maybe that's taking away a little of the focus of two right now guys that are struggling. And I don't know if it's because of the coach. I don't know if the system. Let's talk a little bit about Kreider's hot start and the fact that Alexis Lafreniere and Kaapo Kakko have been invisible over the last 5 to 6 games.
Yeah, so as far as the hot start for Kreider, I felt like people were just really just bagging on him too much for the new contract last season. And yeah, goal scorers are going to go through little funks. But I also knew when Gerard Gallant came in that things were going to change for Kreider in the sense that if he went to the net, he was going to get a load of power play time, most of it actually, and getting a lot of his. And it's no surprise because he's one of the best guys in the league at deflecting and being there and getting in position because of strength. So that's gone really well. As far as the other two, it's interesting because coaches always want players to be better two-way players. So Kakko gets to be a better two-way player and now has 0 offense. He has no points. It never gets talked about, but he has no points. Yet he gets to stay on the second line, which is kind of weird, but I guess Gallant doesn't care if he's not playing badly because he's playing two-way hockey. So what it tells me is Gallant doesn't care if he develops either. He's never talked about it. Nobody asks him about it. And so that's that. So then Alexis Lafreniere, we talk about the Molly Walker situation, and she did done the same thing back in the day. But has it made a difference? No, because all those other games, Lafreniere is getting 9-10 minutes a game, except the Calgary game, which was a 6-0 blowout. So he got 14 minutes because of garbage time. That is not going to help him develop either. So right now the Rangers are in playoff position. Let's say they make the playoffs. Let's say they go around and then they're out. Is it more important that they made the playoffs and got them to be a winning record and everything else, or is it more important that your 2 high draft picks that you are hoping were going to be anchors of the franchise are not developing, and part of it is because of the coach? Which is worse?
I'm 100% on board with you, and that's again the whole philosophy of kind of blowing up that rebuild. And the one bright spot, for me in the game against Columbus, and I don't know if he's playing tonight, was Julien Gauthier. I mean, he finally looked like the player we thought he would be. He is in the lineup tonight, Mike said. So I'm happy about that. But you're right. I think that they are totally, I think they're hell-bent on making the playoffs, because that's their goal. And I think they're pushing development.
So let's move Sammy Blais up in the lineup, even though he only got 4 points because he plays the way Gallant likes and he's physical. And then, Lafreniere toils and has to play. And this is no slight, but like Gaudreau and Gauthier are not the right kind of players for him to play with. Gauthier, if he's with Lafreniere, then you've got to have someone better than Gaudreau. You've got to have a real high caliber guy, someone like Strome at least, that skates better, is more of a playmaker. Gaudreau is not really that. He does a lot of good things, and that's not going to help Lafreniere. And that's the thing that I'm really worried about. Now, with Kakko, if he continues to struggle like this year, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to bench him. I don't know if they're going to try and send him to the AHL or just trade him. That's something to look out for, though.
For sure. All right, let's take a look at the Devils. One of the things that I was shocked at after the unbelievable game that Mackenzie Blackwood had, they come up and it wasn't back-to-back. There was a day off. How did he not start against the Bruins? I don't get that.
I don't know. I mean, he's double vaxxed now, I should assume, right?
Yeah.
Do you think maybe, I don't know when he got his second one.
Maybe just fatigue, you think?
Maybe fatigue.
From that game. Could be.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that makes sense, because he stood on his head, and, clearly you get a shutout like that, you ride that hot goaltender. All right, so we'll give him that. All right, one other thing with the Devils is Nico Hischier. I'm just wondering, you take a look at, when you give a young guy the C, sometimes they press a little bit. Are you seeing a little bit of that with Nico Hischier's game right now?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I also think expectation from from us in the media are higher than maybe the Devils even have for him. And I think that's a part of it. I think he maybe feels some of that too, because right now without Jack Hughes there, Nico Hischier is kind of looked at like the guy. Jack Hughes was deflecting a lot for Nico, if you think about it, and he was probably more comfortable with it. So I think that's a big factor. Now having someone like Dawson Mercer in there to kind of give that youthful energy has been a help. But yeah, and by the way, for people that were telling me a year ago that Pavel Zacha was a bust, and I said no, he's not. He's improving, but he's a big guy, and they take longer. All those people, are basically wrong at this point.
You know what? This just hit my mind because we didn't really talk about Leo Komarov, but you take a look at two things that that have come off the Islanders' books, which means they're going to have a lot of cap space come trade deadline, and if they're in a playoff position to make a run, I'm just wondering. The one thing that this team is lacking right now is kind of a puck mover from the back end. And if the Detroit Red Wings should happen to fall out of playoff contention, Nick Leddy is a pending free agent. Could you see Nick Leddy making a return to the Islanders?
Yeah, I definitely can. I thought he lost a step last year, but maybe he was kind of banged up in that season. But he's got that step back, and they're raving about him in Detroit. So, yeah, I definitely could see it. I just think the Komarov thing is not because Leo wanted to. I think Leo was just told, hey, there's nothing for you here. Do us a favor. And he did it. I know he had this magnanimous post, but I think we all know better.
Yeah, from Russia with love, for sure. All right, Russ, have a good one. Enjoy the slate of hockey as we will once we get out of here. Russ Cohen-Hurd each year and every week with Soho Table Hockey. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with AJ's favorite part of the show, so make sure you keep it to right here.
Looking forward to it.
If you're a company looking to increase your visibility, to make sure your promotional materials get packaged in the most attractive way and distributed most efficiently, then you need to call in PIMS. Whether you're launching a new product and need to assemble customized influencer packages or looking for a more efficient way to manage your inventory and collateral, PIMS involvement helps maximize the impact of your brand's performance. For more than 30 years, PIMS has been helping companies get their message out to the right people, offering personalized distribution services and full-scale inventory management solutions. PIMS works its magic on 3 continents, backed by 350,000 square feet of warehouse space. If you're looking for experience, PIMS is it. They've shipped more than 13 million packages and elevated more than 8,000 brands. Want to know more? Check them out on the web, PIMSinc.com. That's PIMSINC.com, and read testimonials from their satisfied clients. That's PIMS, the first name in marketing support.
You can read it in the Sunday papers. Read it in the Sunday papers.
Scott Muni here at WNEW 102.7. It's not Scott Muni. It's you. You're not Time Warp. It's AJ's theme song. AJ wants a different theme song, but it's Sunday Papers. The show was Sunday. It works.
The one I want to use is Tom Paxton's. I read it in the Daily News.
Yeah,
so that's another.
All right, so
it's a folk song thing, a little different, but
yeah, I think that either one works. But
what you read in the Sunday papers today was South Dakota State football team losing to South Dakota, a big rivalry on a Hail Mary, 57-yard Hail Mary as time expired. South Dakota beat South Dakota State 23-30. It basically knocked South Dakota State out of the 1AA football championship series, playoff run contention.
That's not really weird news, AJ.
That's not the story of the week for them.
Oh, okay. I was going to be severely disappointed if that was.
The week began with actually somebody maybe trying out for the South Dakota State team that maybe they could have used in this game. Unfortunately, it was not a person. It was a moose. And there was a moose on the loose in the area around South Dakota State.
Was it a transfer student from What's the Matter You?
It was not, no. His name was not Bullwinkle.
Okay.
And there's no flying squirrel going overhead. And the police put out all these alerts. They put an alert on Facebook warning of a moose on the loose in Brookings, South Dakota, where the university is. The animal, and there's video of this, made its way to Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium.
Okay.
Goes in through an open gate.
Well, why is the gate open? Wait a minute.
It's almost like it was planned. There was an open gate. It finds the gate. Doesn't seem to open its gate with its snout or something like that. It goes under the field. It does a nice fast run, full from one end of the field to the other. Has a nice run. Probably nobody clocked it. They weren't there. It wasn't like a pro day for the Moose. It wasn't the combine for the Moose. Does the run and just as calmly stops running, gets off the field, and calmly walks out. Moose was eventually captured and escorted out of town.
Was he captured by Boris and Nastasha?
No, but things do not look bad for Moose.
Okay. All right, we have to make it legal. We have to do our top of the hour sounder. You don't have it? All right. So you're listening to Sports Talk New York on the 365 Sportscast Network. Right now, it's time for the Capco NFL Report with Jay Retcher. It is winter is rapidly approaching, so you want to get those. You want to get those screen doors down, and you want to put those storm doors up. So make sure you contact Clearview because they make that retractable screen system. Comes standard with a lifetime warranty, the patented speed reducer, so it won't snap back. You get the luxury of a screen door in a sleek, low-profile design without the hassle of the bulky storm door sliding screen door. Call 631-440-1100 for a free estimate. That's 631-440-1100, or visit them on the web at Clearview.
Hopefully, the retractability helps survive the tornadoes that hit Long Island yesterday.
Unbelievable.
The hail. The hail was
and tornadoes.
Was really, of course, Jay doesn't know anything about hail and tornadoes. And cold.
What looked to be a tornado cutting through the Jets' defense today was
the clock struck 12 on Mike White. Is what
not only that, what's really scary is you take a look at the future of the division that the Jets sit in. And right now, they're 0-3 in divisional play. You take a look at what Mac Jones is doing with New England. You take a look at what's going on in Miami, and you got a very close-up look.
Miami has a quarterback issue. We may want to talk about it later. They just have no confidence in Tua.
Granted, but the thing is, all three of those teams sit in a much, much better position than the New York Jets do. What did you see? And here's the thing. Forget about the quarterback. Forget about Mike White.
It's a defensive coach with two really bad defensive games.
Right. So, what do you see that's wrong, inherently wrong with the Jets defense? Because we have a problem.
Yeah, and first, let me give you a quick background on the Moose. He went to Bishop Sycamore, and my sources tell me that he might be signing with the Rams. So just so you guys know, I keep my ear to the sky and the ground for all you guys for all that information. And, it's a tough thing because you get into games like this, and all right, how's Buffalo going to respond right after that? I don't know what that monstrosity was last week against the Jaguars. So I don't know if there's for the Jets as they are, and we know they don't have the horses, for lack of a better term, or mooses
right.
Compared to some of these other teams in the AFC, especially in the AFC East. So you knew Josh Allen and the offense was going to have a pretty good day today. And you're right. You look at this Mike White situation too, and this is a reason why Mike White was a backup for a long time. And you face a defense where if you ask any of the big-time NFL pundits around the league, they'll tell you that Buffalo's top 3, top 5 defense. So, sometimes you got to tip your cap. And I think at certain situations we could blame the scheme or the players or, man, it's just it's two different teams going in two different directions. I know there's been, a kind of crazy upsets all throughout the NFL the last couple of weeks, but then there's certain games that you look at and go, yeah, that was supposed to happen. And I think that's really what it was today between the Jets and the Bills.
So speaking of crazy upsets, let's take a look at your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Brady had a real off day, and the Washington football team went out and upset them. What do you make of that going forward? What's the takeaway from that game?
Well, a couple things. One, I mean, you saw early on with the pass that went through the hands of Jalen Darden and then picked off by Washington. It seemed like that kind of thwarted whatever the Bucs were trying to do on offense because no AB, no Gronk. And they were playing too high safety, so they weren't going to throw the deep ball that much. And ironically enough, the one time they did, that's when Brady and Evans connected for a 40-yard touchdown. But they were taking everything underneath. And it just, to me, a couple things. One, the injury to Vita Vea at the tail end of the game. They say it's a lower body injury, something with his knee. Hopefully it's not too long. Listen, this is a guy that broke his leg last year, was able to come back for the NFC Championship game and also the Super Bowl. And a big reason why the Buccaneers were able to handle Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs offense. The Sue and Vea in the middle, man, they get an unbelievable push. They were dominant in the game today. He will be a big-time miss. And Richard Sherman, he was a guy, a game-time decision. He was out. So then in this game today, they were without not only their starting corner, Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting, but also Richard Sherman and then D. Delaney, the guy that filled in for him at a concussion. So I don't know how many teams, I don't care if you're Tom Brady-led or any other team, if you're going to be out your top 4 corners, your number 1 tight end, and a big-time receiver, man, it's tough for anybody to win. So I think there's plenty of time for them to figure it out, but it did not look good today in the nation's capital.
You got to take off your Brady glasses there, because you know what? You got to give the Washington team credit too. They lose Chase Young in the second quarter, the best pass rusher they have. They rebounded well from that.
Oh, for sure. And listen, he wasn't the only guy they lost. They lost a couple of guys in that game. And Washington playing under Ron Rivera, they're going to give you a dogfight every time. And Taylor Heineke is one of those guys that he's just awkward enough where he knows when to make the right plays, and people kind of downgrade him and call him a game manager. But the dude go out there, he's got some stones to make the big plays, not afraid to run the football himself. He's got a little bit of that gunslinger mentality, even though he doesn't have, the arm talent of a first-round pick. But I really like Taylor Heineke. In the last 2 games he's played against the Bucs, he's fared pretty darn well.
So Cam Newton gets a touchdown, his first touch. He's 3 for 4, 8 yards, but he does have a rushing touchdown. And it's unbelievable that's what we talk about when Philip Walker
is the Sam Darnold era over.
Well, here's the other thing. Philip Walker is 22 for 29, 167 yards also in that game. So, that's the other thing. Jet fans, can we now take a deep breath and say, okay, we didn't trade away someone that was going to end up being good?
That 3-0 Panthers start to the season seems like a very, very long time ago, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah.
Holy smoke. And, what I'm hearing today is that we may not see Sam Darnold for the rest of the year with Carolina, and I wouldn't be surprised yet. I mean, Cam Newton was on the sideline, having the offense and the defense. He's in the middle of the huddle. He just jumped right back into leadership position. They have a 2-headed monster. With Christian McCaffrey being hurt for the last couple of weeks, Chuba Hubbard has come in, and he was outstanding in college at Oklahoma State. They have 2 really good running backs. You're starting to see Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson, the guy that was supposed to have such a great relationship with Sam Darnold. And now it's like, wow, he's looking like he's got a really good chemistry with Walker and Cam Newton. So Carolina might be making that kind of mid-season push for, I'm not saying the division, but maybe an outside chance at a wild card spot.
So 2 other things to look at. One is the game that's ongoing now. The other is the game that's tonight. Take a look what's going on in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers sits out. He comes back. I guess he doesn't really practice. He does yoga at home while he's on COVID quarantine. And he's coming back and not really they're winning right now. They win the game. It's 10-0. And that's because Russell Wilson was rusty too and is coming back. What do you make of that game of Rodgers' performance? What do you make of Rodgers generally and how much there's controversy over what he did and didn't say and didn't do, and how he lied to the fans will carry on and affect the Packers for the rest of the season?
Well, watching this game today, I'm looking at he seems to just be managing the football game. It is very cold there. You can tell they're in and out of snow flurries, and you can tell both of those guys didn't really practice, or I know Russell did, but you can tell both of those guys are not all the way on their P's and Q's. And Seattle's defense has gotten better the last couple of weeks, and Green Bay is one of the better defenses in the league. So we would definitely want to give the defenses their fair share of credit. But for Rodgers, listen, there's a lot of people that didn't like what he said, didn't agree with what he said, and people will say that he lied or at the very least was misleading to the media. But at the end of the day, as much as we want to get upset as fans, as members of the media, if he's good with his team and he's 100% transparent and honest with them, then I think in their case, in their position, that's all they care about. And guys, we've seen this all across sports. Winning solves a lot of things, and winning sweeps a lot of things under the rug. So if they're 15-2 at the end of the season, we'll look back on this and be like, that was kind of slimy. But if they win 15 out of 17 games, I don't think the Packer fans are going to be worrying about a press conference,
So looking ahead to the game, tonight's game, a lot of different angles. The one I want to talk about is the rich get richer. So Odell Beckham Jr. signs with the Rams. Is that the thing that puts them over the top? But they lost Woods. So is that a counterbalance?
Wait a minute. We have this thing with Odell Beckham is the Carmelo Anthony of this show. We talk about Carmelo, but do you think he goes to the Rams, who are on their way to the Super Bowl anyway? He could derail them. Is he going to play a key piece? What do you think? Will he derail them? Will he provide the extra? Will he fill in because Woods seems to be hurt?
Well, the thing is that he plays a different position than Robert Woods. That's the one kind of misconception that people think, like, oh, he's just going to go in the same spot. It's like, not necessarily. But what I have a lot of faith in is Sean McVay does an outstanding job of getting his playmakers in a position to succeed. Now, are we ever going to see Odell that we saw the first 3 years with the Giants? No, I don't think so. But when you look at a guy like Cooper Kupp and the way he runs routes and the way he brings so much of the defense towards his side, you have to figure if Sean McVay can find ways, like he's done with Robert Woods, like he's done with Josh Reynolds and Van Jefferson, who went to Florida, who's going to get some of his time eaten up because of Odell Beckham Jr., you'd have to think that he's going to make some sort of impact. I don't think it'll be a negative impact in fact of being like a cancer for the locker room, because this is almost like a show me deal. This is one of the things where he has to go out very similar, if you want to make the Carmelo comparison, to when Carmelo went to Portland. It didn't work out in Houston with Carmelo and James Harden and those guys. He went to Portland for the first time. He said, I'll come off the bench. And then eventually worked his way into a starting lineup. And then everybody's like, wow, yeah, now he's one of the top 75 players. Now he's on the Lakers. So, yeah, this is going to be Odell's – let me see if I can put this right. Odell going to the Rams is like Carmelo going to Portland. This is this 1 year to show everybody, hey, I still got some juice left in the tank. I can get paid again. I can help a winning team. And the proof is going to be in the pudding. And from what I'm hearing, he's going to return punts and at least be a little bit involved in the offensive part of the game. But if anybody can get anything out of OBJ at this point of his career, it's definitely Sean McVay.
Or do you think OBJ is physically capable of
That's the thing.
For that?
And that's the thing amongst it all. Whatever being a head case, his lack of production, he's been hurt, and that's another thing. We talk about this all the time. What's one of the most important things of ability? It's availability. And he could blame Baker, and his dad can go on social media all he wants. But your son's been hurt a lot in his entire career, dating back to the Giants as well. And if you're not on the field, I don't want to hear anything about missed passes or miscommunications or anything like that. And we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a tall task because if he's going to be returning punts, you got to be careful, man, because those guys are coming downfield very, very fast. And if he's not careful, he might get his head knocked off, man. He's got to keep his head on a swivel. He hasn't been returning punts with regularity probably since back at his LSU days.
The Cowboys are very quietly putting together a really, really good season. They put a 43 spot up against the Atlanta Falcons.
That quietly, people are noticing them.
What? But I mean,
there's no question about the strength of schedule who they played so far, but
that's true. But the thing is, there are a lot of other teams that get mentioned way ahead of the Cowboys. But today, you take a look at what Dak Prescott did. Granted, the Falcons are a 4-5 team. And it's also interesting because, you see how quickly they do have weapons. They have offensive weapons. Right. But
if Dak Prescott is healthy and firing all cylinders, they have a lot of weapons.
Absolutely.
Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper. The receiving core.
Ezekiel Elliott. They do have a lot of weapons. But the other thing that when you watch a game like that, you then even marvel more at Tom Brady, because you look at Matt Ryan, all right, and look how good Matt Ryan was. And he's nowhere near what he was. I don't know if that was the Cowboys' defense today, but for the Falcons to put up 3 points, as Matt Ryan as a quarterback, I almost put his line of demarcation is when Brady came back and beat them. He hasn't been this. I don't think the Falcons have ever recovered from that. What do you think about that, Jay?
No, it's a great point, and I get a chance to see Atlanta twice a year, and you're right, man. It was almost like they could not shake off that 28-3 lead, and it cost Dan Quinn and Dirk Cutter and the coaching staff their job. You traded with Julio Jones, the best receiver in franchise history, and now Calvin Ridley, he's out now for personal issues. I think they made a terrible move in the first round this year, drafting Kyle Pitts, and I thought they needed help on the defensive side of the ball, or at least rushing the pass somewhere in the trenches. I mean, you're a team that's not really that close to competing. So even in your own division, you're behind the Saints and the Bucs by a long shot, and you draft a tight end with an aging quarterback. That didn't make sense to me at all. As far as Dallas goes, their pass defense isn't all that great. And listen, when you can pin your ears back on like you did today and jump out to a lead, Dallas just beat you on sheer talent. But when I look at Dallas, I look at the game last week, going into the game against the Broncos, everybody was saying, oh, they could be a Super Bowl contender. And then they got smoked from bell to bell by the Denver Broncos. And Vic Fangio did a great job of mixing things up. And he goes, people have been playing the Cowboys all wrong. And I kind of wonder, because they're very kind of secondary heavy, where they just try to throw a lot of guys there. And now they've lost Randy Gregory, the number one pass rusher. I wonder if teams punch Dallas in the mouth, if they'll be able to respond. I think that's what Denver did. And there's going to be teams with more talent than Atlanta are going to look at the tape between Denver and Dallas and goes, we're going to do what Denver did in their hometown, and that's going to be the way to beat them. But you guys are right, man. They have so many weapons. They got Michael Gallup back, Lamb, Cooper, Zeke, Tony Pollard. Man, they're a dynamite offense, but the defense, still a question mark. Even Micah Parsons, the rookie, I mean, he's an unbelievable splash player, but you get him out in coverage, any rookie linebacker is going to struggle.
All right, Jay, we'll speak to you next week. Jay Retcher here.
All right, go Rangers.
You got it. We're here each and every week on Sports Talk New York. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back right after this.
Decolator Cohen and DePrisco, LLP, is pleased to introduce their website, policeofficersrighttosue.com, as an educational and informative site designed to instruct members of the law enforcement community of their civil rights in line of duty accidents. Many law enforcement members are not aware of their rights to sue and fail to bring lawsuits within a specific time frame, thereby forfeiting their ability to seek rightful compensation against those parties that cause officers to be injured. PoliceofficersRightToSue.com provides successful past results of line of duty lawsuits. These examples range from officers being provided with inadequate equipment, RMP accidents, slip and falls, and station house mishaps. If any law enforcement member has a question regarding a potential lawsuit, they can contact DCD at PoliceofficersRightToSue.com or at 1-800-901-1LAW. That's PoliceofficersRightToSue.com or 1-800-901-1LAW.
And welcome back to the home stretch of Sports Talk New York. Mark Roseman, AJ Carter with you this Sunday evening.
The expanded version.
The expanded version, yes. Unfortunately, tonight, Brett Topel was not able to do a show. He was going to do a best of. His computer, crapped out on him, so he wasn't able to get that. So we figured we'd give you a little bonus coverage today. And then probably right after us, we have a couple of good shows. And then obviously have Buried Treasure.
You tuned on, wanted to hear BT Talks Baseball, and you got Sports Talk New York.
Welcome. Welcome. All right. So right now we're going to talk a little basketball, and we bring in Chaim Tauber. So Chaim, before we get to the local guys, this is something that I've always loved this player. You guys know that I love Steph Curry. You take a look at what Steph Curry is doing now. All right, and granted, it's a long season, and he could go into a slump. He absolutely just lit up the Hawks for a season high 50 points Monday in the 127-113 victory. He was perfect, 13 for 13 from the free throw line. Just a third warrior to do that in the franchise history. I'm looking, and let's say he has this storybook season, and gets the Warriors to a final. And wins an MVP. Where does that put him in, the all-time greats? Where does that elevate him if he should do that this year?
It's a really interesting question. It's a really tough one, as it is anytime we have these legacy conversations, because it doesn't turn into who's the best player. It turns into who's the most influential and who's the most, whatever the case may be. Well, how would he have stacked up in that? How would Steph Curry have handled the 90s defense where, you're dealing with zones and players slamming into the floor every couple minutes? He wouldn't last a week with his ankles. It's tough. It's tough to answer it. And obviously, every generation of fan is going to have their answer to Steph Curry. If you're in the 90s, answer would be, yeah, but Tim Legler's a 50% career three-point shooter. If he was averaging more than 2.3 three-pointers a game, what would he be? The 80s and 90s fans, Magic Johnson is the untouchable. He is the greatest point guard of all time. There's nothing Stephen Curry can do to unseat him. To the 90s kids, it might be a Jason Kidd. It might be a Chris Paul. I think that Stephen Curry has unquestionably catapulted himself ahead of Chris Paul in terms of all-time point guards. In terms of all-time players, Will Chamberlain in the centers kind of changes it. He's not in the Michael Jordan, LeBron conversation. He's not in the.
Is he in the current?
Ask yourself this question in terms of the way the NBA is currently structured. It's a game of threes, not the way it used to be in the old days. Is Stephen Curry cashing in on that, or is it a game of threes because of Stephen Curry?
No. Stephen Curry is why the game is what it is. Stephen Curry and the Golden State Warriors were the template for the modern NBA. And I mean, the guys who are coming out now are the next Stephen Curry. You have Trae Young, who's supposed to be the next Stephen Curry. That's what kids are shooting. And look, I mean, I coach sports on a high school level also. I'm seeing these kids in the gym practice shooting threes from the logo. And as awful as that is for basketball and for anybody who grew up watching basketball in the 90s, these kids all want to be Steph. And he's marketable. And he is right now doing it with a cast of essentially nobodies. He's taking the Jordan Pooles of the world. He's taking the Gary Payton Juniors. He's put them on his back and he said, hey, follow me, guys. I'm going to shoot us into a championship. And he is. There is no question who the MVP in the NBA is at this point in the season, early as it is. Stephen Curry has lit this league on fire again. And he is, in terms of most influential players of all time, I would put him on a Mount Rushmore right now. In terms of best players of all time, that's a different conversation. But this guy's changed the way basketball is played in the NBA.
But that's what I'm saying. So you take a look. If he should, right now he's won 3 championships, okay? Yeah. And one time he actually kind of gave up the number one role. He kind of seceded when they brought in the Dream Team. He distributed a little more. He changed his style of play. Now you're right. He is with this cast of characters. If he would win a championship, his 4th championship in this fashion, I don't know.
Well, ask yourself the question of winning multiple championships, and who's had more influence on his team and importance, Steph Curry or LeBron James, who have done with multiple teams?
Well, yeah, again, I think it depends which LeBron James team we're talking about. I mean, if we're talking about the Miami teams, right? Yeah, those are teams that might have gone there without him, and I would say the same thing about the Durant, Klay Thompson.
Right.
Yeah.
If we're talking about LeBron dragging that first conference finals, dragging the Cavs, the second player was what, Larry Hughes or Mo Peterson? I don't think Stephen Curry or anybody who's ever walked God's green earth could have done with a roster like that what LeBron James did. I think that this might be right up there in terms of most impressive individual Herculean. I mean, the only other guys who I can think, I mean, Hakeem did that with a team. Again, that was 90s basketball. It was a different team. There was one roster where Hakeem Olajuwon is the only name that anybody today would recognize on. LeBron did that once or twice. But yeah, Stephen Curry, this is a cast of characters. Look, he's got some guys who can play. Klay Thompson's going to work back into being Klay Thompson. Who knows if we'll see James Wiseman. Andrew Wiggins is a legitimate scorer. He's got some pieces around him. And it's an NBA where you can shoot yourself in from downtown on any given night. I don't think it's something that he's going to be able to sustain over the course of a season and a playoff run. But yeah, I think this would definitely launch him into that conversation. It would do wonders for his legacy, which, we're always talking about. Stephen Curry's legacy, yeah, it would grow by leaps and bounds if this team somehow won a championship as currently constructed.
So let's move on to our local teams. Let's talk about the Knicks. And the concern with the Knicks, both the first unit not gelling and then basically not playing defense like a Tom Thibodeau team plays defense. Which is more concerning to you, the overall non-gelling of the first team, the starters, or the fact they're not playing the same type of defense they played as recently as last year?
Well, I think to an extent, it's the same concern. I think them not gelling is a big part of why the defense doesn't look like it does. And I think that it's as concerning as it is because of Tom Thibodeau's history. At this point in the season, most coaches would have played around with lineups a little bit. Most coaches would have made some changes. Most coaches would have played around with the minutes distribution and things like that. Obi Toppin should probably be getting more, or if you ask me, Obi Toppin should be getting more minutes tonight than he is. Should be getting a longer look. Should be getting a little more leash. And he's running, again, the same guys into the ground, even if they're not gelling. Kemba Walker, he had a huge first quarter the other night, but still kind of struggling to find his place or his role on this team. Derrick Rose on any given night is the guy. And then, let's try to force feed Kemba some more looks so he feels comfortable. Yeah, there's some chemistry issues to work out. And I also think that to an extent, Tom Thibodeau's stubbornness when it comes to his roster, his minutes, his guys is hurting that a little more than helping that. It's certainly not something that I think it's something that the Knicks can get right. I think this isn't something that is irreparable. I don't think this isn't something that can be rehabilitated. But I think it's going to take a little bit of give on the coach's part. And with that will come a little bit more give on the player's part, a little bit more share of the ball, a little bit more share of the assignment. But I think that has to start at the top. And I think that starts with Coach Tibbs.
One of the things we mentioned earlier was that, the Steph game against Atlanta. Atlanta's now lost 6 straight games. what are you seeing from that Hawks team that just looked so good against the Knicks last season in the playoffs? And early on they look good, but all of a sudden they're just not gelling. What is it about the Hawks right now that Hawk fans should be worried about?
Yeah. So again, last season they were dealing with some injuries. Herter, DeAndre Hunter, guys like that. They're banged up again. Capella's dealing with an Achilles issue. They're talking about moving John Collins, let him playing a little more with the bench unit. There's a matter of trying to get all the pieces to fit together. With a healthy DeAndre Hunter, with a Herter, with all those guys back, where does Danilo Gallinari fit in? Is it a youth movement? There's a balancing act, kind of like what the Knicks are dealing with as well. On top of that, I know everybody's going to be quick to point to, hey, rule change. These are the anti-Trae Young rules. How's it going to affect? And I don't think that has that much to do with anything. I think for the most part, it's a matter of a team who so far has looked terrible on the road. It just went off a really bad run where they lost 4 straight on the road. They're a team that's a little banged up in the front court, trying to find the minutes distributions, just trying to dial up the right combination. I mean, Mark, you're a hockey guy. If the lines aren't gelling, most coaches will start tinkering and trying to just find something that clicks. And it doesn't always have to be, hey, this guy's the puck handler, this guy's the playmaker, this is the guy who's in front of the net. Sometimes it's just a chemistry thing. It doesn't even necessarily make sense on paper, but damn it, these guys work together. And Atlanta right now is trying to figure out, hey, this kid's giving me the perfect 3-and-D stuff. He should be a perfect complement. How does he fit with a Gallinari? How does he fit with a John Collins? Is Trae Young able to run his mid-range game, or is he now being stuck just being an outside long-distance shooter? And there are some kinks to work out. People forget, as dominant as the Hawks looked in the playoffs, pre-Nate McMillan, for the most part, for the better part of the season last year, they were a very mediocre, maybe a little bit below that team. So it might take a little time to find their footing. It might take a little time to get their minutes, to get their rotations right. I don't know that there's necessarily a larger problem at play here, other than figuring out where all the pieces fit. Kind of the same thing I'm seeing in New York right now.
All right, Chaim, thanks so much. Chaim Tauber here each and every week with the NBA Report. We're going to call it a night. A good show. Yeah. Enjoyed it. Thanks to Arthur Staple. Thanks to all our beat guys. Next week, make sure you tune in. BT Talks Baseball will be back in its normal time slot. We'll be back in our regular hour, but we will also have Bobby Valentine.
Really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And once again, AJ, happy 85th birthday. We hope you enjoyed.
When I get there, hopefully you'll be around to wish me the birthday.
Hopefully. All right. We'll see everyone next week. Have a great one, everybody.